Hey, this is Ed I Know Doug, and you're listening to Homestead Grown Live, the weekly live show of the Homestead Grown community at community.homesteadgrown.org. That's homesteadgrown.org. And again, this is Doug, and I think, Maria, are you out there?
I am. Can you hear me?
I can. I can hear you
Cool.
loud and clear.
Awesome.
So good. So my wife is joining us, and hopefully each Friday she'll be joining us each Friday. And so they'll have a little bit of a change of voice from time to time, as hopefully she corrects any place I go wrong. And Maria, of course, feel free to add um, anything you want when you want. So
The feminine touch. You want me
the
to add the
feminine
feminine
touch.
touch? Okay.
Yeah, yeah. So tonight we're going to talk about, and the topic is, what would you do if you became convinced? Doesn't matter how you became convinced. You became convinced that supply lines in your country, so not necessarily just the United States, because there are countries all over the world that have already experienced this and do experience it. But if supply lines in your country would collapse within 12 months. So basically, the scenario I'm proposing here is you have a 12-month head start. Now, it's a 12-month head start that you have figured out and you believe is um, it's going to occur. There's no guarantee that it's going to occur, but all the signs point to it from your perspective, and so that you're convinced of that. So that's the subject. So Maria, be thinking about that. And then the second thing we're going to talk about, if there's enough time, is what is just-in-time inventory management. And actually, we may end up talking about that while we're talking about the first one. But before we get into the topic, I wanted to talk a little bit about the vision I have for homesteadgrown.org and the community, community.homesteadgrown.org. And so I wrote this vision, and I'm going to read it. And hopefully it'll be self-explanatory, but I might elaborate a little bit. So our vision at Homestead Grown is to create a thriving network of self-sustainable homesteaders and small-scale farmers or family farms who are actively working towards a more resilient and sustainable food system. We envision communities coming together to share resources and knowledge, supporting each other in our efforts to grow healthy, nutritious food using natural and environmentally friendly practices. By empowering individuals and families to become producers of their own food, we strive to increase access to fresh, locally grown, and sourced food while also promoting environmental stewardship and community building. And so, there's a couple of buzzwords here: environmental, and what was the other one? Natural. That's not to say that we exclude. If you use pesticides or herbicides, you're welcome here as well. I just think that if you're growing yourself, you're better off learning to grow organically and practice organic, but you're not excluded. So uh, the more that we can grow in environmentally friendly ways, great. Uh, if there are particular things that you need to fight with an herbicide or pesticide, better that you have food than not have food, and it can be very frustrating to lose crops to bugs, right? So,
Can I ask a question?
yep,
Can I jump in? All
yep,
right. So, forgive me because I am not as learned as you. But so say someone does use herbicides and pesticides, and in your opening you were talking about supply chain issues. It's possible that things like that would also become in short supply, correct?
that's correct.
Um, so is it a huge adjustment to go from if you're doing all of your gardening and food raising using those products and then they suddenly become unavailable? Is that a tweak that you could just kind of sidestep and work around, or is that like, oh man, we've got to figure out how to start over and make this work without it?
So that's a really good observation. I would say I think it's I think it's a big leap, because some of the things you need to do to grow organic is is um, you need compost, and preferably even vermicompost. So you can't ramp that up in a couple of days. So if you don't already have compost piles going, and you don't have, again, specifically vermicompost, so that you're feeding your plants with good fertilizers, um, then you're going to struggle to get up to speed. And then if you've relied on sprays and things to keep bugs away instead of bug netting, and you may not have that stuff on hand. So
Gosh.
if you plan for, if you say, okay, I'm not going to practice organic. And by the way, if practicing organic is going to stop you from getting off the ground, then don't let it stop you. Get going, right? It's progress, and momentum is much better than perfection. So, but you may want to plan for some purchases that you may not use and you may never use, but if you did need to use them, you would have them.
Yeah, that's good advice, I think.
Yeah, it's a great question. So that's the any. Did you have any other comments on that vision? I think that pretty much explains. You've heard me talk about this for a couple of years, and I've never really articulated it in a vision statement. Um,
Yeah,
does this? Do you think it captures it? I think it
I
does.
think I think so. Yeah, I
Great.
think you did a nice job at that.
So as you're listening, that's really what we're all about. We're all about helping each other grow cleaner food and sustainable in such a way that we aren't dependent on big box grocery. And again, one of the things I've said, and I'll probably say 1,000 times, is I never want to find myself in a position where I'm making decisions because I'm afraid my children are going to be hungry. And this does harken back to the pandemic, where my experience at the grocery store was I was told I couldn't go into the grocery store unless I put on a mask. And while I would put on a mask to prevent my children from going hungry, the idea of being forced to take a vaccine, or not a vaccine, but to be injected with something in order for my kids to not go hungry, is the hill for me to die on. So uh, it really kind of lit up in me the need to, again, at first it was to be able to produce all of my own food, and I was dead set on, this year we're going to do everything right. But it gets overwhelming, and got overwhelming, and we failed. And so I've tweaked it, and I've decided, it really isn't about, I don't want to set myself or anyone else up for failure. It's about getting started and progress and moving forward and learning and how to model everything, so that if push came to shove, you could scale. But if you don't know everything you need to do and you don't know how to model it, then you're really just kind of shooting in the dark. So that's what this is all about. And hopefully, we'll eventually reach the people who need and are open to that message. So, before we get into again the topic, there's a couple other announcements. The first is the community is making progress. So, community.homesteadgrown.org is now more live today than it was yesterday. And thanks to a handful of folks who I really appreciate, it's starting to actually have some content, and there's some interactions going on. So I would encourage you to go to community.homesteadgrown.org and sign up. And the reason I say that is the first 100 members will be considered the founding members. And so long as participation is continued, you'll have a lifetime membership. So should the site ever choose, or should we choose to start charging for any training resources or other resources, that first 100 would be free. Now, I'm one who likes to try to give everything away, but I also understand that there are a lot of folks that, unless you pay for something, you really don't find value in it, and you won't take it seriously. The first 100, I believe, will, because they're all naturally attracted to it, and that's why they're good to have in. So once that first 100 is here, I'm probably going to shut things down and shut off the access for anyone beyond that, until we work through really all the kinks, and the community really starts to thrive, and we kind of hit a rhythm, and then we might open it back up, either for a charge, or for another tranche of, if you will, of users. So hopefully that makes sense. But the first 100 founders are free lifetime access. Um, next week. My hope is I will have an announcement for you next week about the beta test of the Grow Model Food System course. So if you keep peeking into the community, you might start seeing some changes. And this is one of the tough things because it's new and the software upgrade just went in place yesterday. I'm scrambling to start to put things together. And so you may see things move around a little bit, and what you once found over here is over there. So be patient. But my hope is that next week when we do the show, I'll be announcing the timeline or the schedule for the kickoff of the beta of the training. And what that will consist of is on-demand materials that you could view or take daily, and then a once-a-week live presentation Q&A discussion. So the first, there's 4 pillars, right? The first pillar is the plan. The second pillar is hyper local economies, and then grow model gardening, and the fourth is grow model animal husbandry. So we'll start off with the plan, and at the end of week 1, we'll have a discussion about the sessions that you would have taken on demand off, outside of the group on your own, and we'll have a discussion about that content. And then we'll go to the next week and so on and so forth. And what I will do with that is, in the spirit of trying to make this as good as I can for the future use, we'll take the feedback from this beta test and we'll put it into the course so that future um, groups can benefit. Okay. Um, Again, I wanted to say a big thank you to the first few founding members. I truly appreciate your feedback, your patience while we get this stood up, but most of all, I appreciate your participation because um, it it makes me feel like I'm not alone, and the more participation and the more folks join, I think the more momentum we get, and again, the more many people will benefit from this early participation. I especially wanted to call out Terry, who I've been posting these pictures of a hydroponic um, kit that I purchased, and we're growing lettuce in. And I think I started posting pictures at day 16, and we said we were going to harvest on day 21. Turns out I didn't harvest till today, which is day 22. And I made a little video, so go out and check that out as well. But Terry said, "Hey, it'd be interesting to know if we had the same lettuce growing in dirt side by side, what the results would be." And I just had the biggest smile on my face. And I think I interrupted my wife, whatever she was doing, and I said, "Hey, uh, this suggestion just came through, um, and the reason I get excited about that is right up my alley, and that is one of the things that in the community that we'll do. We will design experiments as a community, and then we'll execute them as a community, and then we will all benefit from the analysis and the published results from those experiments. So this is in a very small way our first such design of experiments, and I will write that design up, and hopefully by next show I'll have that published and we can read through it. In preparation for that, I know that I need the equipment to grow as close as I can to the same number and spacing and lighting, and I want to try to keep all of the variables um, in control. And so I purchased a second hydroponic kit. The difference is we'll just put soil instead of the water solution, and we will plant at the same spacing. We'll use the same telescoping light. We'll keep the lights, at the same height as the plants grow. We'll continue to move them up. So everything will be the same. The size will be the same. The lighting will be the same. The only difference will be the growing medium will be soil rather than water. And the soil will most likely be the soil that we use in our raised beds, which is the Mel's mix, which is 1/3 peat moss, 1/3 vermiculite, and 1/3 compost. And that compost is made up of multiple sources of compost. So that's probably the soil we'll use. And so we'll see what happens.
And
But thank you. Yeah, go ahead.
can I ask a question? So
Yep.
Out of curiosity, I know, I planted those seeds out in those exact seeds actually, in the greenhouse, and I probably could. I realized the all of the variables would not be identical because spacing would not be the same. Um, but would we? I know that we soaked the seeds. I think if I recall, it was for 5 hours before we drop them into the little pods. Would we soak them before we plant them in the soil, or would we just sow them straight into the soil like I did in the greenhouse?
That's a great question. Let's do a little research on that to make sure that we don't set the seeds up growing in the soil. Some seeds need to be soaked, right? But typically those are harder shelled um, seeds. So let's do a little research on that before we do. What we don't want to
Okay.
do is we don't want to set it up to fail, right?
Right.
Um, but we know that for the hydroponics, because the way they're being grown and they're not sitting in soil, they're sitting in those little sponge things. That
Right.
was a requirement. So we'll do it. We'll do a little research on that. Good question.
Yeah. Yep. That's why
Thank
I'm
you.
here.
Yeah. Yeah, and if someone knows, if you know, feel free to shoot us an email or let us know. I'd love to see what other people's experience is. Okay. What else? What else? What else? What else? Okay, that's it. So again, Maria's with me, and Maria, feel free to jump in. But our main topic is what would you do if you became convinced that supply lines in your country would collapse within 12 months? And so I had a series of questions here that I would ask folks, and I'm going to ask you. How's that?
Who, me?
Yeah, you.
Okay. Yeah. Sure.
All right.
Totally.
So
I'm.
if you became convinced that supply lines were going to collapse within 12 months, would you do nothing?
Oh, is this multiple choice?
No, this is a yes or no question.
Oh,
Would you simply do nothing?
no, I would not simply do nothing.
Okay.
That feels like a double negative, but
Yeah, it is.
okay.
Um, would you start stockpiling food and medicine?
Ye- Um, some, yes.
Okay, how much?
I think I would stockpile items that I cannot easily grow myself that have a long, stable shelf life.
Okay. Okay. Um, would
Is
you
that the
stock?
right answer? Are there right
Well,
answers and wrong
no.
answers?
This is
Do I
just
get graded?
discussion. There's no grade. There's
Okay.
no grade at the end.
All right.
Um,
Because
would
I'm
you?
going to use this.
Yeah. Would you stockpile gallons of water?
No,
Okay.
that would
w-
take up way too much space.
Okay. Um, would you tell others?
To stockpile water? No, I'm just kidding. Well, certainly. They might think I'm a whack job, but yeah.
Okay. Um, how would you tell them out of curiosity?
Um, I
And
would
what would you
say,
tell them?
"Hey, dude, you you best be stockpiling." Um, um, no, I would just say, "Hey, yeah, I don't know. Did so in the scenario, I know that the supply chain is going to
No.
disappear, or I'm just suspicious.
Well, you've come to the conclusion that it's going to.
Okay.
Um, there's no, there's no proclamation from authorities. No, it's just you're reading the the news, and maybe you know people who are part of the food chain. Yeah, you're close to farmers. You're close. You just
Okay.
kind of know some inside baseball, if you will. But
All right. So
but you're not certain.
this is what I would say. I
Hmm.
would say, "Hey, did you do any shopping during the, height of the pandemic or in the weeks just as things were getting ready to shut down or in that first week? Did you do any shopping? Yeah, that was crazy, right?" Right, totally, cuz everybody realized how crazy it was cuz food was kind of flying off the shelves, like toilet paper. You remember toilet paper? Yeah, everybody remembers toilet paper. Well, what if that was chicken and nobody could buy chicken? And not just chicken, but chicken and beef and pork and like all meat. What if it was all of that? How would you eat? And have that discussion. And when they say, well, I don't know, I guess I just order Domino's. And you say, okay, well, Domino's isn't going to be able to get their dough and their pepperoni and their cheese. And so they're not your answer. And they would go, oh, yeah, I mean, I guess you're right, right? Yeah, okay. So then maybe it's time to start thinking about what would you do and how are we going to get you to a place where you're not trying to call Domino's to have a sauceless, cheeseless, pepperoni-less, I'm making up words, pizza, um, for the next, 15 years of your life.
Yeah, no, great. Great. I don't think I think the other thing there is obviously uh, if there's no pepperoni and no sauce and no cheese and no toilet paper, my guess is that Domino's isn't delivering either. So
Right.
uh,
Yeah, there would
it
be
might
no,
it'd be
you know,
short-lived if they were.
right.
Okay.
Right.
So
So I realize that maybe that approach is not like ideal, but you kind of put me on the spot. But if you want me to like write a script that involves Domino's with sauceless, cheeseless, pepperoni-less pizza, I'll work on that.
okay. So a
Okay.
dough pizza.
A dough pizza, just dough
But
pizza.
as we know from the pandemic shortage, even
Flour,
flour, well, not just
yeast,
flour, but what else?
yeast.
We could not find yeast.
Yeah.
Yeast was
Everybody was baking some bread.
Yeah, yeast was gone. I think it still may be in short supply. But anyway, um, okay, so let's keep going on my list here. What about
Yep.
seeds? Would you purchase seeds?
Yes, I would definitely purchase some, but I would also purchase a book on how to save seeds.
Okay. How many years worth of seeds would you purchase?
Well, I don't know. I mean, I guess to be honest, I don't know that I know the prices. How many years do seeds last?
It depends on how you store them, but seeds can last several years
Okay,
stored
I would
properly.
probably buy several years of seeds.
There you go. Okay. Would you plant fruit trees,
Sure. Yeah.
even though they might not produce fruit for 3 to 5 years?
Well, yeah, because in 3 to 5 years, I'll be the luckiest girl in town.
Okay. Um, I think the same answer would be, would you plant berries? You'd probably say yes.
Yep.
Would you start to network with your neighbors, and why?
Well, for sure. I mean, because, well, it, they might have knowledge or supplies that I don't already have. And, for instance, somebody like our friend Tessa might be just brilliant when it comes to foraging. And so you can only stockpile so much, over the counter medicines. And you probably want to start having somebody that knows how to identify different plants and their uses and how to make them into tinctures and yeah. So, yeah, for sure. And then for other foods and, meat, how they raise meat, maybe somebody's a hunter and they hunt deer, but we don't hunt, but we garden. So, you get into a really nice relationship where you can trade and swap knowledge and goods.
Okay. Would you buy chickens or rabbits?
You can't ask
Now
me that.
let's just assume we don't have anything. Let's just assume that we don't have any of the stuff that I'm talking about.
Well, I know that. Right. I'm just saying because for anybody that doesn't know me, which is like probably all of you, um I've got weird food issues. So the idea of consuming rabbit just kind of skeeves me out, but I know the answer is rabbit.
Well, I
If
said, would
this
you
was
buy
a quiz
chickens
with
or
the right.
rabbits? So it's you know I'm not I shouldn't have said it either or. It's or maybe it's chickens and rabbits.
Oh,
Um,
I didn't know it was and or.
yeah.
Um well, yes. So then yes, I would.
Okay. So actually, that kind of goes along with one of the things that we'll talk about in future episodes, and certainly will in the course, which is grow what you eat, raise what you
Yeah,
eat, and then eat what you grow or raise. So, to your point, um, the idea of eating rabbit just doesn't sit well with you. So, unless you are in the most dire of circumstances, you're probably not going to eat rabbit, right? So,
right.
as a matter of course, um, if rabbit is served at this house, you won't be eating it. Now, obviously, if you're starving, things
Right.
change. But okay, would you buy goats? And specifically, I'm thinking
For
dairy
milk.
goats. Yeah, for milk. Yeah. And if so,
Because
how
I
many
don't
would you
want
buy?
to mess around. Oh, how many?
Hmm.
I would probably have um well, to start, I think I would just have maybe two does and a buck,
Okay.
right? I mean, you'd have plenty of milk, but then they only produce for so long, right? I mean, how many years would a doe produce milk?
Um, probably a decade at least.
Oh, really?
Hmm.
Oh, well, then maybe just two does, and then hope that you have a neighbor that has a buck that they will stud out.
Okay. Um, would you pray more?
Sure, yeah.
And would you draw closer to God? Do you think that you would naturally, again, you have this, you've fallen into this knowledge where you believe that the supply lines are going to break down within 12 months or in 12 months. Would you draw closer to God?
Sure. Yes.
Okay. So, when you think about that list, it's really everything that we're about, right? Um, I think common sense would say if you are if you've become convinced of this, then common sense says that you should stock up on food, learn to grow, stock up on animal stock up on seeds, learn to learn to do some of these things. Um, but the problem would be, where do you start? And how much do you need? And this is where I think the models really come into play. You don't really have to guess, and if you are guessing, your guess is a measured guess, and assuming that it doesn't collapse in 12 months, you'll have some history to learn from, so you can adjust your models so that they get more and more intelligent every year, or more and more based on experience every year, so that you are truly growing what it is that you need to grow in order to supply for your family and perhaps others, whoever you added into the model. um, and what I would say is, it's kind of like an insurance policy. We spend a lot of money. I know we look at our health insurance, but we spend a lot of money on health insurance, right? um, Stocking up and having an insurance of food is wise. It shouldn't, you said that when you would talk with people, that it wouldn't really matter, but they might think you're, what did you say?
I
A
think
wackadoodle?
I or a kook. I can't remember.
Yeah,
One of the two.
something along the lines of they would think you're crazy. But no one thinks you're crazy if you buy a life insurance policy when you don't expect to die for 30, 40 years, 50 years.
Yeah.
Um, and yet you should have a life insurance policy. You should have a food insurance policy. Um, and having those dry goods in reserve for a year, and then having your the ability for you to scale up on fresh and preserved foods, and through animal husbandry, the meats and the eggs and the milk, um, it's just wise. It isn't wackadoodle at all. So thank you for playing along,
Yep.
Maria. And so what I wanted to say at the end here is, when we talk about just-in-time inventory management, I'm sure we're familiar with this, at least in practice. We may not know that there was an actual term for it, or we may have just been kind of aware in the back of our head that this is how it happens. But you ever notice that at most grocery stores, even at like a large wholesale store, there really isn't a back stock room that's just as big as the grocery store, right? The grocery store stocks, I don't know if this is true or not, but you hear this bantered about, and if you do a search on it, you'll see this number as well. But the grocery store stocks about 3 days supply of food, and so within 3 days, if the store isn't resupplied, it's empty. Now, one could argue that if the masses became convinced that there was supply chain issues, it wouldn't take 3 days. Might not even take 3 hours, right? The store would be emptied immediately. But the point that I'm making is that there isn't an endless supply, a never-ending supply of food and resources, and that the veil of civilization would fall very quickly when people start to get hungry, and there's a desperate nature that comes across when you don't believe that those stores are going to be resupplied, or worse yet, they're not going to be resupplied. Now, I'm not suggesting that's going to happen in 12 months. I will say there are signs. If you look around, you see signs, and you hear farmers talking about shortages. You hear shortages of fertilizers and shortages of this and that, and that the, if you just do a Google search on the global food supply, you'll see that there's discussions about famines, and um, all of that could be propaganda. Um, some of it could be true. Some of it could be um, uh, exaggerated, or it could all be the signs that are pointing to, hey, it's time to get supplied. But either way, it's wise to have um, the insurance policy of both the foodstuffs stored and the knowledge to grow and raise, and the models that tell you how much to grow and raise so that you can scale should something go awry. Maria, any closing thoughts?
Um, no, I don't think so.
Okay. All right.
Although I did
Well,
just put something in the chat box, so um,
you have a fun idea
that
for next week's show if you don't have a plan? What's the fun idea?
here's my fun idea. I
Okay.
think it would be really cool, and you can totally shoot me down, and maybe I shouldn't put this on like live because then you might go, no. But I think next week we should do a like 12 days of Christmas episode where we identify 12 gifts to give someone that is getting ready to get started with, their own little homestead food growing kind of,
I love it.
yeah, I think that'd be cool.
Okay.
We'll do some homework and come up with the top 12 gifts for
So the idea here is
homesteaders.
this, the idea is assuming that they don't have anything. right? So what
Right.
would be the
They're
12
just right.
things that you could
Right.
give someone as a Christmas present? Not over the top, right? It's not, I'm going to
Right.
give you
No,
100 acres
just
of
like,
land.
if for your neighbors and anybody that you're kind of trying to inspire to kind of join the efforts, what are some things that, right, not like $3,000 anything or even $300 anything, like your little hydroponic thing,
Yep.
kit, you know? So
Yep. Yep.
anyway,
I love it.
I think that'd be fun.
That's what we'll do.
Okay.
Cool. So join us next week and come up with your own 12. Call in next week. We'll try to make this as uh, par- participatory as possible. And so call in and tell us what your 12 are, and let's see if they match up with our 12. Until then, have a great night and a great weekend, and thank you for joining us.
All right. Good night.